What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about X2 X-Men United. So here we are continuing on my X-Men series, and a big thanks to my buddy Justin from Lomas Entertainment for joining me here in this review. As I said in my last video for X-Men, my goal moving forward is to have a different guest on for every single one of these X-Men movies as I go through all the X-Men movies I've yet to cover here on the channel. And before this series, the only one I had actually covered was X-Men Dark Phoenix, the last one that came out. So I do look forward to doing these movies with everybody as we move forward. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces, some new faces to the channel, and ultimately I think this is going to be a really fun series to go through. So as I mentioned in my review for the first X-Men, these early X-Men films were some of the most formative films for me in my really formative years of falling in love with film. Not only did it help solidify my love for comic book characters, comic book movies, but also just solidifying my love for film, because ultimately these were the movies I was going to see as a kid in the theater. These were the films that I was supporting the theatrical experience with as a kid. These were the movies that I was just screaming to my parents to take me to see on opening day. And yeah, without a doubt, this film is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. It has one of my favorite openings of all time, with the character of Nightcrawler making his first appearance in live action, played by Alan Cummings. Yeah, I really enjoy that opening sequence, and I think it's one of the best opening sequences in any comic book movie. Once again, you have returning cast members on top of new cast members, people like, Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Famke Jensen, James Marsden, Halle Berry, and the list goes on and on and on. It's fantastic to see all these characters come back, and you once again have Bryan Singer in the director's chair, who I think again had a really great vision for these characters and the story. When you see the first X-Men movie, especially by today's standards, it's a pretty simplistic tale. It's pretty grounded, it's pretty straightforward, it doesn't really do too much, the stakes aren't too big, and there isn't too much going on. But the writing is pretty simplistic. This one also keeps a very contained story, but the writing here is far, far better. The acting is far better. The tension is far better. And you can tell that Bryan Singer had a bigger vision for this film, or a better vision, or a little bit more time with these characters to really create something that is incredibly memorable and still to this day is known as one of the best comic book movies ever made. The basic premise of this film really hones in on Logan, Wolverine, played by Hugh Jackman. At the end of the last film, he was sent to Alkali Lake by Xavier as he's trying to uncover things about his past, because he doesn't remember anything about his past. He doesn't remember how he became who he is. And so he ends up going there, and that's how the movie opens up, and he just finds this desolate land of snow and debris, and he can't find anything there. So he comes back to the X mansion. He ends up telling that to Xavier, and later on we end up finding out that what he was looking for in that location was actually underground. And what he was looking for was actually run by William Stryker, played by Brian Cox. One of the new characters introduced into this film, but a huge character in the X-Men mythology, especially when it comes to the story around Wolverine. You'd see his character reappear throughout the course of the live action films on multiple occasions, but I think Brian Cox's version in this movie is without a doubt my favorite of all the iterations of William Stryker that we've ever seen in live action. So William Stryker's whole thing is that he had a son named Jason, and he technically still does, but Jason is an illusionist. Essentially, he has the mutant ability to make you think and see anything that they want you to. And so over the course of time, he was kind of torturing his mom and dad, leading to his mom ended up killing herself. And so Brian Cox just hates mutants. He resents them. They ended up sending Jason to Xavier's school at one point, and that ended up not working out. And it was when he came back that he ended up just kind of being a menace to them. So Brian Cox's character, William Stryker, is now this person with a vendetta against mutants. He thinks that they're a plague, a curse, a disease. And what he's ended up finding out how to do is taking a chemical from his son's brain that is actually the mind control element that he uses as a mutant. He ends up taking that component from his son's brain and is using it now to control other mutants. This allows people like Nightcrawler to be under his control at the very beginning of the film when he's attacking the president, as well as people like Lady Deathstrike, who's in this film, who is essentially his dog the whole movie. He kind of just keeps her on a leash consistently. She doesn't really say or do much, which is a disappointment if you're a fan of the character from the comic books, but she looks great in the movie, and yeah, he keeps control of her over the course of the film. And so you have all that stuff going on with William Stryker as he's now trying to control the mutants, and his goal is to control Professor Xavier to try and use Cerebro to find all the mutants in the world and try to kill them with his mind. And that's the basic premise of what's going on with William Stryker. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have Hugh Jackman and the gang now trying to run away from what William Stryker is trying to cause for them. They try to, come and get everybody at the X-Mansion. That leads to this really badass sequence where they all have to kind of defend the X-Mansion but also escape. And a lot of it is about Hugh Jackman's character, Logan, figuring himself out, trying to find who he is, learning things about himself while also having to keep the other X-Men that are with him safe, and the X-Men in general having to stop Stryker from what he's trying to do, which again is have Professor Xavier use Cerebro to kill all mutants. And there's so many other little things that are happening here, but that's the basic premise. And overall, I find this to be such a well-written, fun film. The performances are great. The pacing is great. It's never really boring while you're watching it. It's engaging. It's thrilling. It's got some great elements as far as storytelling. And one of my favorite things, like I mentioned in the first X-Men movie, that I think is just tackled so well here is I love how they handle the prejudice in these films. I love how they're able to take, real life prejudices and, put them on mutants in this film, but really show the disgusting side of people, you know what I mean? The fear. Now, of course, there's superpowers involved, and you can totally understand where certain characters are coming from if they are afraid of mutants. But I think that these films do a great job, and the X-Men stories overall always do a great job of taking real life prejudice and adding it to something like this and giving you a different perspective on, how people feel and how people may feel afraid of those who have prejudice against them. Now, I mentioned before you have Nightcrawler in this film played by Alan Cummings, and man, I remember as a kid just being hyped as fuck about this movie. The amount of times that I saw the poster or had on my computer pictures of Nightcrawler from that movie specifically, I was absolutely hyped because Nightcrawler is my favorite X-Men character from the comics and from a lot of the animated stuff. I've just always thought he's so cool. I've always wanted his ability, and so that opening sequence for me is just this pure, beautiful Nightcrawler goodness. Unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of what they did with Nightcrawler in the prequel films, which we will get to at a certain point, but as far as this film, I think that Alan Cummings did a great job, and I really wish he would have returned in the role in future installments. Another new face in this film is Aaron Stanford, who plays a character that we saw in the last film, but as a new actor this time around, and he actually has a role in the film this time around, and that's the character of Pyro. And yeah, we see him for a brief second in the first film, and that's one of my issues with these films, is that there are little moments in the movies where you have a character in the background played by a different actor that's supposed to be almost like a hint and nod, but then in the next movie or a couple movies later, they'll end up introducing that character as one of the big players in the story, but they're now played by a different actor, or maybe their second or third actor, depending on when they decided to bring them into the franchise. There's even things like Hank McCoy being, regular Hank McCoy on a TV screen at one point in this film, but, we know that he's Beast, and in the next film, he's played by a different actor, and he's full-on Beast, and when he meets with the X-Men in the next film, it's as if this is who he's been for a long time, and they already, have a connection with this man, that is a beast, you know what I mean? That he's full-on mutant at this point. So, it's not like it's super far into the future between the second and third film. So when there's little things like that, they were supposed to be like little Easter eggs, but you can tell they didn't have a plan. You can tell that they were like, oh, cool, let's take that character that we kind of teased in the last movie with a completely different actor in a way that doesn't make sense, and let's bring them into this movie now with a different actor and actually give them a story to play. Like I mentioned before, we also have Lady Deathstrike in this film, who disappointingly doesn't really have much to do in this film other than look really cool, but she does look cool, and she's played by Kelly Hu, and I really enjoy her in this film, but yeah, I just don't really feel like they were giving her much to do as a character. She's just a cool person that leads up to a badass fight between her and Wolverine. And then the only other memorable person to really mention here that's new to the movie is Daniel Cudmore, who plays Colossus, but again, given pretty much nothing to do, would end up being a bigger part of the third film, but yeah, in comparison to the more comic book accurate version that they've brought into the Deadpool films, I'm not a huge fan really what they did with Daniel Cudmore's version of Colossus here, but as a kid I loved it. So I've been rambling on for a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump over to what Justin has to say about this movie, and we'll get back to my thoughts in just a moment.
Thank you so much for having me back on the channel, Anthony. It's been a bit since we collabed, but I'm more than happy to talk about one of my top 3 favorite X-Men films. I don't have this one on 4K, I just have the regular old Blu-ray that's been in my collection for a while, but nevertheless, let's just get into it. When this first came out years ago, I saw it opening weekend with my dad and brother. He used to take us to the movies all the time. And it didn't disappoint. It still doesn't. From the opening Nightcrawler scene alone, who wouldn't be hyped watching this? There's some differences from the first movie, but they're necessary, like Storm and Rogue losing their accents, and the actor who played Pyro in the first film being recast. Seeing this movie again, which is almost 20 years old now, it's crazy to think that, but the CGI in this holds up very well too. Not just the crazy effects you all think I'm talking about, but I'm talking about like the practical stuff that's touched up with a little editing work. Iceman chilling Logan's soda, and even like when Pyro is getting pissed off by these dudes and he just like winks and ignites the dude's cigarette and blows up in his face. Stuff like that is what I miss in modern movies. And I mean, can we talk about that theme? Dun, 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 dun. There's a reason why they brought it back for Days of Future Past. That shit slaps. We have the great John Ottoman to thank for that. I'm sorry, Perez, but I gotta gloat a little bit. Back in 2019, I actually visited the filming location for this movie. Seeing the same hallways and spots Wolverine and all the kids ran down, it's just surreal, man. I get a lot of movies have to do sound stages nowadays because it's just so epic, but having a real, tangible filming location is just so cool to me. And if that wasn't enough, we gotta talk about this cast. Hugh Jackman, Famke Janssen, Ian McKellen, James Marsden, everyone blends so well together. Their chemistry is crazy. The awkwardness between Bobby Drake and Logan, it's just so well written. Because you have Iceman, who's dating Rogue now, and like, who is this random best friend that Rogue had that I don't know about? Like, he's just this walking, talking, testosterone-filled dude. Like, I mean, I would be intimidated. If that was you, y'all would feel self-conscious too. My personal favorite standout, though, is Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler. He's such a badass, and him slaving away for all those hours with the makeup totally paid off. Speaking of that, I found out the opening White House scene where you know how it shows him as like white-skinned and whatnot. I always thought that was his image inducer from X-Men Evolution, you know, but apparently it was actually makeup to disguise himself. The more you know. Besides the great action scenes like Magneto breaking out of his plastic prison and Pyro just incinerating the hell out of all those police officers, we gotta talk about the number of references and Easter eggs in this movie. Hank McCoy, aka Beast, casually shown on a TV at a bar. Mystique is hacking into a computer, and we get a laundry list of X-Men names, some which include Gambit and Danny Moonstar from New Mutants, who apparently has a cameo at the end. Going back to Mystique though, I kind of prefer her suit look in this versus Jennifer Lawrence's iteration of the character. I don't know, like, Rebecca Romijn just pulls off the character in a more sinister way, and like, I don't know, the look fits her. I know y'all would love to hear me rant about more positives with this movie, but I have a few gripes that I just want to get out there. First off, poor Daniel Cudmore. I don't hate him as Colossus or anything, but after seeing the iteration in Deadpool, I definitely prefer that version of the character and the actor playing him. Another small issue is Cyclops is definitely nerfed in this movie. They went the Hawkeye route in the first Avengers movie, you know. We never really get to see him show off his true potential. I know some of y'all are waiting to see him be the leader he was meant to be like in the comics. And I can respect that. Wrapping up my thoughts on this, it's a near flawless film. We get to see how mutants are viewed in the eyes of the normal people and feared. And most importantly, I know she was in the first one, but this one showed us Halle Berry, you know? I mean, if I can simp for just a second, I was all about that new look. And it's safe to say, when I saw this, 12-year-old Justin was definitely feeling some things. Still am though, not gonna lie. I really would like to see her back one last time. Come on, Kevin Feige, do your thing. If y'all haven't seen this one, I highly recommend it. And if I'm not mistaken, it's on Disney Plus now, so what are you waiting for? Perez, thank you so much for having me on your channel and being in this entry of the series. Thank you so much, everyone out there, for watching. Back to you, dude.
A big thanks to Justin for being here in this video. As usual, you guys can find the link to any of my guests down below in the description box. Go give them some love, let them know I sent you. And yeah, man, I loved hearing your thoughts, and I loved having you on for this installment. It seems like for the most part, we're on the same wavelength, and yeah, this is just a really good time, and I'm glad that you had a good time going back and revisiting it too. So we've talked about the cast, we've talked about the basic premise, and now at this point, I just kind of want to talk about why I love this film. I think for me, it really captures what the X-Men is all about, you know what I mean? A fun adventure that deals with prejudice, but also doesn't make that the forefront of its storytelling. Now, in the last movie, it definitely does that a lot more, and in this one, obviously, it is the motivation behind the character of Stryker, but at the same time, they tell a good, fun, exciting adventure that's mixed with action, both big and small, with stakes. And the very end of the movie is emotional when Jean Grey ends up, you know, sacrificing herself so that everybody else can get away from Alkali Lake, leading into what would happen in the third film with her returning as Phoenix. You know, I really thoroughly enjoy the performances here. I enjoy the emotion here. You know, when I was rewatching that scene specifically where everybody's trying to get to her out there, even Nightcrawler trying to teleport out to her, and he's like, you know, she won't let me. The performances from the cast are top notch. And James Marsden in specific, like, he really sells you on Scott Summers and the love between him and Jean Grey. And that's one of my favorite things about, you know, these movies, is I feel like, especially with the first three, they really captured a great essence of these characters from the 90s cartoons or from the comic books, you know what I mean? Sure, there are creative liberties in various directions that definitely take things in different, you know, directions than what we fans are used to, but I do really feel like they did a great job of capturing who these characters are. Of course, Hugh Jackman is just phenomenal as Wolverine. You have Patrick Stewart Stewart, you know, as Xavier, fantastic. And this sequence altogether, everybody's performance when Jean Grey is sacrificing herself, especially from James Marsden and Hugh Jackman, is strong. It's emotional. There's that great moment where Jean is speaking through Xavier, you know, saying that, you know, everything's going to be okay, you know what I mean? And that, you know, that she's going to do this. And James Marsden is like pleading, you know, through Xavier to her. It's real, it's raw, it's emotional, and I really do believe that more than anything, moments like that really make this film transcend being just a simple comic book movie. It transcends just being a movie about the X-Men. You know, ultimately this is a film about people in really dire stakes, you know, people who love one another, people who have, you know, connections and a family. And I think that without a doubt, this movie really captures the essence of what the X-Men is. Whereas in the first film, it's really honed in on Hugh Jackman and him kind of being part of this X-Men team and him kind of building that family by the end of the movie. It's this movie that really leans into that family element that makes the X-Men stories so fulfilling. And it's part of why I love X-Men so much. When I think about my favorite things within like Marvel in particular, at this point, you know, with the MCU, they've really just gone all out and they pulled so much from the comic books that I loved. But as a kid, you know, my favorite things from Marvel were the X-Men, Spider-Man, and the Avengers, just separately in the comic book forms or like cartoons and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I just love the X-Men storylines. I've always just loved these characters, and I think that specifically the first two movies just captured the essence of what the X-Men is so well. And without a doubt, this is still one of my favorite films of all time. Going back and revisiting it, I think it still has such great looking action. The special effects are still top notch. The performances are great. And again, this movie does such a great job of touching on various elements of prejudice in such a good way that keeps it interesting but doesn't really make it feel like it's pushing that down your throat. So again, a big thanks to Justin for joining me here in this video. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love, let him know I sent you. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave the question in your hands. Do you guys like this movie? Do you not like this movie? I look forward to having the next installment, X-Men 3 The Last Stand, where I'll be having my buddy Mike from Did You See That joining me for that video, so you guys can look forward to that very soon. And yeah, definitely can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this film. And if you're not a fan, I definitely want to hear. I'm definitely curious, what about this film doesn't work for you? You know, it's a shame that Bryan Singer would end up turning out to be a complete asshole, because it's a phenomenal director and he knows how to create a movie, but of course apparently he's a creepo and an asshole, and why does that keep happening with these directors? But I can separate the person from the art, and I think that he and everybody involved here created a very great X-Men film that ultimately, if you've never seen it before, I highly recommend going back and binging these movies. So a big thanks to you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.